Hello, fellow preppers. 'Tis I, the Rumpled One. Basic Disaster Life Support, put out by the National Disaster Life Support Foundation and the AMA, American Medical Association. Chapter 3, Population Health and Mental Health in Disasters. Mental health, that's something a lot of people don't really think about, but when it comes to disasters, you need to consider it because you're going to have to deal with it. I'll read some of the chapter headings. You've got the purpose, which is to discuss disaster-related health issues and challenges faced by children, women, individuals with chronic illness, and people with access and functional needs. It also discusses mental and behavioral health consequences of disasters on all affected ages and populations. So, it's just something to consider. Children in disasters. You see, children are not small adults. Their anatomy is immature. So, you just can't treat them like they're small adults. It's just something that people, when I say it, and I even hear myself say it, it sounds so obvious. But the thing is, people don't really realize the difference. That, children, growing bodies, a lot different than a mature body. And you have to recognize that and respect that and acknowledge that difference. So you have to be able to prepare in advance to handle children during a disaster. I mean, just simple things like medical tools have to be a different size in some cases for children because they're smaller. So they talk about the body surface area of children, that the ratio of the BSA, body surface area to mass, is highest at birth from the head relative to the lower extremities. Central nervous system, circulatory system. You see, if an adult loses a pint of blood, that's not as bad as if a child loses a pint of blood. Once again, it sounds so obvious, yet a lot of people miss it and just don't realize it. The respiratory system. So their children's lungs are smaller and they're more delicate. So something that might just be an annoyance to us could incapacitate a child. Their skeletal system, more susceptible to fractures. So that's just a few of the things about children that you need to know. Also, how you communicate with children. You have to deal with different age groups differently. Because think about it, in a disaster, it's stressful, a lot of chaos. Could be a lot of chaos, panic. So you have to learn how to talk to children. One of the other things is that you have to be able to identify who belongs to who, family, and how you reunite them. That's something, because a disaster could happen. Mom could be at work, dad could be at home or at his office, the kids could be at different schools. How do you reunite the family unit during a disaster? Then there's women's health issues in disaster. And it says that women and children account for 75% of displaced persons after disaster. So with women and children, you have to think, like when they talk about lodging and shelter, there's certain privacy that women and children need that us men don't really have to have. Sanitation, pharmaceuticals, and hygiene supplies. Once again, they have needs that us men don't. You know, pregnancy management and health testing. Once again, in a disaster, you can't go to the hospital, maybe the road's closed, maybe the hospital's leveled, you know, or no power. These things are important, you have to take into consideration. Physical and sexual assault. I mean, we all know what happened at the Houston Astrodome during the Katrina catastrophe. And then people with chronic illness and disaster. How are you going to deal with them? How are you going to get to their medical and health records? I mean, these are things, the logistics behind this is just staggering. And you need to make sure your city and your hospital have a plan to deal with these type of things. Because they might not even know about this. They should, but that doesn't mean that they do. And so once again, you don't want to count on somebody else. You have to take responsibility for yourself. You see, it's real simple. You can be a victim or you can be prepared. And people with functional and access needs. I mean, people who require support to be independent in daily activities may lose this support during an emergency or disaster. What are you going? How are these people going to cope? Who's going to take care of them? Communication. If they're impaired in some way, who's going to communicate with them? Transportation. Some people can't drive. Some people don't drive. Some people don't have anything to drive. Supervision. Some people need to be supervised. Who's going to do it? I mean, and these people, there's communication challenges to be dealt with, evacuation challenges to be dealt with, sheltering considerations. I mean, it's big, it's huge. This is just one aspect. Now, remember, you've got all these other things going on. This is just one segment. And mental and behavioral health in disasters. Some people have psychiatric illnesses. Some people have severe psychological reactions to trauma and stress and the chaos. You've got to be able to identify this and deal with it. I mean, there's just the stress and the psychological trauma. I mean, insomnia, sense of vulnerability. People might start smoking and drinking to excess if they can find cigarettes and booze. I mean, all this, you have fear, helplessness, worry, anger, confusion, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, tension, changes in sleep patterns, loss of appetite, and just stress. I mean, there's just so much. And they have a screening tool, or depression symptom screening tool they call SAD of Faces. Sleep. Do you have insomnia or hypersomnia? Appetite, increase, decrease, or weight change. Dysphoria, sadness, irritability. Anhedonia, lack of interest, pleasure, sex drive. Fatigue, decreased energy. Agitation, psychomotor agitation or slowing. Concentration, reduced ability to focus. Esteem, decreased self-esteem or increase in feelings of guilt. Suicide, feelings that life is not worth living or having an active plan or means to kill oneself. So these are things you have to be screened for. They talk about psychological first aid. So you have to protect the affected people from any further actual or perceived harm. You have to care for their basic survival needs as food, shelter, clothing. There's a few other things. Then they talk about outreach and information dissemination, technical assistance, consulting, and training. Then mental health considerations for children and adolescents. And that pretty much sums it up, but it's something that you really need to consider, because chances are, I would wager, you haven't even given it a thought. It didn't come up. But that was one of the great things about this course, is that it brought things up. In fact, I received another certificate saying I successfully completed this course. I need to print it out. Anyway, basic disaster life support. Once again, this course is usually offered for free, and it's for the medical professions, but anybody can take it. So if you're lucky enough to live somewhere, say within 50 or 100 miles, it's a one-day course, take it.